Hi, I'm Dana, and today I want to talk about some of the co-occurring conditions that can often come alongside being autistic. And as always, this is just my experience, this is what I've been through, this is what I experience and what I deal with and what it's like for me. That means that it might be very different for you. Me not including something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, that it doesn't happen. And similarly, me including something doesn't mean that it's gonna happen for everyone. It's just me, it's just my experience. Big disclaimer, I'm only talking about myself, entirely self-centered, narcissistic, whatever you want to call it, it's just about me. That being said, this is obviously also a video topic because they're quite common co-occurring conditions. They're not things that are just only ever experienced by me, and hopefully other people can relate a little bit. And they're also quite largely things that I could do with knowing a bit more about myself. There's going to be a lot of descriptions, a lot of I think it's this, I don't really know. So it's not, this isn't a video to diagnose yourself with. None of my content is anything to diagnose yourself with. It's just a little bit of relatability, a little bit of validation, a little bit of, it makes me feel better, okay? So I'll start with where my diagnosis started, because I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety as a 12-year-old, and the anxiety bit is very, very true. The depression bit, not so much. I have only ever experienced big bouts of depression after having very, very stressful things happen, after having big things change, after having to really push myself to get through a situation. And it's very, very clear to me at this point in my life that it was autistic burnout. I wasn't depressed. I was lacking energy. I was lacking motivation. Because I was burnt out, it was nothing to do with being depressed. And I don't think that depression is honestly a diagnosis that fits me. And although I do very much have extremely high anxiety, and to be able to discuss things with doctors and everything, and to be able to talk about me on a medical level, I do have to be able to point out I have anxiety, but I do on a deeper level very much think that it's a more part of my autism than a co-occurring separate thing, you know? I think the vast majority of my anxiety comes from the experiences that I've had, because they have been predominantly negative, and I think that they've mostly been that way because I'm autistic and I didn't react socially in the way that people wanted. I didn't read the right social cues and whatever else, you know? I very much think that my anxiety is based on the fact that I'm an autistic person, and without the autism, the anxiety wouldn't exist. I wouldn't just be an anxious neurotypical person. I don't think I'd experience anxiety if I didn't also exist as an autistic person, you know? But one of the big things for me is that no doctor has ever listened to me. So from a really, really early age, probably from the age of 7 or 8, I complained because my hands hurt a lot, my wrists, my ankles, my knees, I just have this pain. And I always really struggled to explain it to anyone. And I was written off as having growing pains until I was 19. And then from that point on, they were like, oh, it's because you're overweight. And then I lost the weight, and now they're just like, that's so weird. Yeah, you shouldn't be in pain all the time, should you? That's so hard. But when I was a kid, it was mostly my ankles and my knees, and as I've gotten older, my shoulders, my back, my neck, my like I said, my wrist, but it's not an ache. Even though it's in the joint, it doesn't feel like the joint aches. Resting that joint, not moving that limb doesn't make it go away. It just sits there, and it feels like my bones hurt, you know? It doesn't feel like it's a muscle ache, it doesn't feel like it's a bruise. Squeezing it, resting it, none of it makes any fucking difference. Sometimes warmth helps, if I have a really hot bath, that can sometimes help. But it's 24/7, there is always some level of pain. And there always has been, you know? And I think it's a added level of difficulty when I go and talk to doctors and I'm like, oh, how long have you been experiencing this? And I'm like, all of my living memory. Stuff's always hurt. My body has never ever been in a state where nothing hurts. Something always aches, something is always in pain, something always feels like it's just not quite right, you know? And once I started sort of engaging more in the autistic community online and seeing more TikToks and engaging with people on Instagram and all of that, I started seeing post after post about EDS. And the more I looked into EDS, the more I've been oh, this fits so many symptoms that I have, including ones that I thought were completely unrelated. I've talked in videos before about how I am a vomiter. It's pretty grim, I'm really sorry to have to bring it up. But I throw up quite a fucking lot, and sometimes I know that it's anxiety, you know, there's the times when I'm anxious and then I feel sick and then I'm throwing up and I'm like, yeah, duh. But I also have a whole bunch of times that I will just wake up out of a dead sleep in the middle of the night and have to go and throw up and then just get back into bed, you know? There's a whole bunch of times that I wake up in the morning and I'm just immediately like, oh, I need to vomit now. And there's various types of EDS. I'm not a doctor, I'm not trained on this, it's just stuff I've googled for myself, but there's various types of EDS, and there's a specific one that I've looked briefly into, let's face it, very vaguely, because it all scares the shit out of me is the thing. But like the symptoms that I didn't even realise would add into that are all listed, and I'm like, oh, I guess it's EDS, like I guess I have some degree of that going on, and I really don't want to have to deal with it, honestly, because it's one of those where, like, yes, I'm currently in pain, but if I just ignore it and don't have a reason for it, it might still go away. Like, if there's a name for it, I'm diagnosed with something, then it's there, you know? And it's ridiculous, but that's how my brain is with it at the minute. And not even, like, just towards diagnosis, but towards, like, if I start wearing braces or treat it in any way. But then it's also a thing of, like, one of my friends got me, like, the whole back brace thing, and it immediately sorted my spine, it made my shoulders stop hurting, and 2 minutes later I felt really, really sick, because any sort of pressure on my stomach just makes me feel like I'm about to throw up. So it does often feel like it's also a thing of, like, in treating one thing, it just exacerbates. It just makes another problem worse, you know? And it's like, yeah, I fixed the first one, now this other shit's like way worse than it was. I'd rather just have a bit of the first one and a bit of that one. So I'm jumping around a little bit because this is obviously, like, based on me and my experience and all that kind of thing. But a lot of mental health stuff has been, like, sort of, like, thrown at the wall with me to see if it sticks, and it hasn't. But there's also a whole bunch of mental health stuff where I'm like, well, what else is it then, you know? Like, I have a whole video that I made that I'll post here, link here, about autistic psychosis, and I'm trying really not to get annoyed with the comments, because like I said in that video, I went through 2 different, like, diagnosis processes to see if I had OCD, and they went through, like, 3-hour-long, like, assessments with me, and they were like, yeah, you don't have, like, you know, you have these very obvious traits of OCD, but then all these other things that don't line up with it and that aren't OCD, and all these other things that you should have if you have OCD that you don't have. I had that happen with OCD, bipolar, BPD, and I think something else. I definitely had, like, another diagnostic thing that was, like, for something else, but it was either, like, straight psychosis, or it was just a general, like, we'll assess you and see if anything pops up. It was one of the two. And it's one of those where, like, nothing ever quite lined up right, nothing was ever quite fitting the diagnostic criteria. Something was always missing, or there was always an extra little thing where it's like, well, that doesn't line up. And that was where I was diagnosed in 2019, so I would have been 22, and it had taken up to that point just having people constantly tell me, like, you have this mental health thing, you have this mental health thing, and being like, okay, but my doctors are telling me I don't, and the doctors are telling me it doesn't line up, and when I Google it, there's a load of stuff that doesn't line up, you know, like, it doesn't seem like it is that thing, does it? And I think that's where a lot of the studies that go into, like, what it's like to be an autistic person and so on are going towards people who have, like, very, very high support needs, which is obviously completely necessary because they have very high support needs, and figuring out how we can best support them is vital. But I do think that it often means that people like me are very like, well, is this something to do with being autistic? And they're just like, I don't know. And it's like, I'd love to know. I'd love to know. Because I keep having people tell me it's this and it's this and it's this and it's that. And being told by medical professionals that it's most certainly not, because I'm missing all these other bits or adding on all these other bits. And that's where I do also think that for me personally, I don't have mental health issues per se. You know, like, I think they all stem from the fact that I'm autistic. And the symptoms can present in the same way as mental health issues, which is where it becomes a mental health issue, but I don't think I have, like, a diagnosable mental health thing. And I could be super wrong. Maybe one day I'll meet the doctor that's like, oh, bitch, and I'll be like, oh, bitch. But right now, that's where I'm standing with it and how I feel about my own mental health. However, another big disclaimer, that's not how I feel about everyone else. I don't know what you're going through. Every time I've said this, I've had people be like, oh, so you don't think that autistic people have mental health issues? I think you can have all sorts of other stuff going on. I just don't. Just me. Just this bitch. You know, I have, for sure, like, little traits and little, like, niggles of other things, but I really think that they're all stemming from me being autistic and not having whole other, you know, conditions or disorders or whatever else. And I don't necessarily at all think that's the case for the autistic people. I think probably some of us. I think that often when I'm going through something, someone else probably will be too. But I don't think that's the case for everybody. I think that there's plenty of autistic people that have, you know, multiple diagnoses for a reason and very much do fit those things and do have those things. Yeah, like I am in no way medically trained enough to start questioning anyone's fucking diagnoses. And I also very much think if you've been diagnosed with something and they're giving you treatment and it's helping, then you have the thing, like go for it, get the treatment, improve yourself, grow, be happy. I'm someone who, whenever I've been given antidepressants, whenever I've been given like random fucking tablets and whatever else, I've taken them and it's made me worse. And that's why I really like, I don't think I have the mental health condition that requires those medications, you know? Like it would help me and it doesn't. And that's why I think so much of it is tied into being autistic, but they just don't know what to do with me or how to help that. And I do think it's something that's going to get much, much better in the next like coming few decades because more and more people like me are being diagnosed. But for me currently, I do feel like a lot of doctors just really like being able to say, no, it's this, take these meds. And then I take the meds and I don't feel any better because it's not that thing. Or they're like, oh, it's probably this, just go to this diagnostic thing. And then I go and then it's not the thing. And then I'm just left and there's no sort of follow-up, you know? And I feel like I've jumped back and forth from like mental to physical to mental. And now we're jumping back to physical. But it's also another type of thing where I asked the doctor if I could have like the diagnostic thing to find out if I have dyspraxia. And he was like, you're covered in bruises and you're autistic. There's no point us diagnosing, you just assume you have it. And it's like, okay, but I would like to be diagnosed with things if I have them personally, but whatever. But it's the kind of thing where it's so common that a lot of doctors are like, just assume, just assume. And I'm like, okay then. And it's also one of the things that I've just never actually properly looked into. And I really should, and I probably will after this video. But because my brother was dyslexic, I was constantly told that I was just trying to pretend to be like him. And obviously, I was not trying to fall over thin air. I was not trying to fall off my chair for no fucking reason. I didn't even fucking like him. Like, I really was not trying to be like him. It just so happened that I was incredibly clumsy in the exact same way that he was, except he'd been diagnosed with dyspraxia and I had not been. And I don't think I'm ever gonna get to be at this rate because doctors just don't like to diagnose me with things. They just like assume it's there, and I'm like, okay, like I get that it costs you money and everything, but I would like to actually like know if I have a thing or not. My experience with doctors haven't been great and it does make things a little bit more difficult, but being able to look into stuff and just try to figure things out myself a little bit has been helpful. I really struggle with like sorting out accommodations and actually trying to like assist myself and help myself with things. I sit in denial about things for quite a long time. You know, that's why having like a 3-year waiting list for my autism diagnosis was actually quite helpful because I had 3 years to just pretend that nothing was happening while knowing full well that I was autistic. So yeah, that's what I tend to do. I don't like having to acknowledge things. I don't like having to do things, quite frankly. And I get there, I do them eventually because we all have to, but it's rough, innit? It's hard. But yeah, that's today's video. I know it's a bit rambly and disjointed, but it's the type of thing that I want to talk about, but I really do not want to give across any sort of like authority on the matter because I do not have a clue. I am not in any way trained, I'm not in any way educated, I haven't actually got a fucking clue. Like I say, it is just me and my experience and what I've gone through. And I so massively want to keep it super like informal and relaxed and rambly because I'm not a doctor and this is not a diagnostic tool and I'm not, you know, this is a relatable little video for other people going through the same kind of thing. It's not for people to like figure themselves out from necessarily. I'm not trying to be an authority of any sort. So yeah, that's the video. If you've enjoyed, it'd be really nice if you want to like and subscribe. You can also follow me over on Instagram if you'd like to, and over on TikTok. I'm actually quite, like, I post on TikTok probably like 4 or 5 times a week most weeks, and I actually enjoy it as well and speak to people. So if you wanted to follow me there, that'd be really fun. As always, if you'd like to do like a one-time little donation over on Ko-fi, I will have that linked down below, along with my Patreon where I post content early. And I swear to God, I am going to come up with actual ideas and start interacting with people over there and actually being a part of that community. I've got some things that I've written that I really want to post, but I'm really nervous about. I get so nervous about posting anything I've written because it feels like with a video I ramble and yammer away and there's loads of words here, you know, you can see that they're just coming out. It's obviously not scripted or anything. When I write something, I've chosen those words and put them in the places that I want them and stuff, and if it's not good, you can tell that I've put effort into it, and I hate that. Whereas if a video is a bit shit, it's like, well, what level of effort did I put in? You'll never know. I put in a lot more effort than I ever want people to know. But yeah, so there's Patreon, And that was the last thing I had to promote at the end here. So whoever you are and wherever you are, I hope you're having a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, and I will see you again in a couple of days.